Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, we are continuing our ongoing coverage of the war between the Russian Federation and Ukraine, as well as other conflicts around the world. Now, today, there has been a very important bit of information coming out of the Ukrainian High Command. Now, what has caused this information to trickle out in the form of an interview with the Supreme Commander of Ukrainian Forces, General Zaluzhny? Well, recently, within the last 48 hours, the Russians have launched massive and overwhelming attacks all along the line of contact, running south of Avdiivka, north of Avdiivka, towards Kupiansk. Essentially, the entire line of contact has come under withering Russian heavy artillery attack, long-range multiple launch rocket systems, and more importantly, a pickup in Russian fixed-wing aircraft strikes against Ukrainian targets. Now, this has been ongoing, but within the last 24 hours, we have seen this Russian onslaught uptick. Now, what did the Supreme Commander of the Ukrainian military have to say recently? Well, he said essentially that the war was in a stalemate. After the failure of the Zaporizhzhia offensive by the Ukrainians, we're now understanding that General Zaluzhny and his North Atlantic Treaty Organization handlers in the United States believed that the Ukrainian offensive would last for about 4 months. And that offensive would lead to a breakthrough and put the Ukrainian military in a position to then assault the Crimean Peninsula, or be in a position to conduct large-scale attacks on Russian positions in the Crimean Peninsula. That did not occur. The reason that did not occur is technology, modern war. Just as the NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and the United States is able to observe Russian movements and then direct very precise fires against those Russian formations, the Russians are able to do exactly the same thing. Specifically what happened in Zaporizhzhia, south of Kharkiv. The Russians were able to identify Ukrainian movements of large forces and then direct heavy artillery, attack helicopters, and ground attack aircraft to hit those attacking forces, thus making it impossible for the Ukrainians to advance. The Ukrainians then attempted, and are still attempting, small unit operations with light infantry and lighter armored vehicles, lighter wheeled armored vehicles in this ongoing endeavor. That also failed. The Ukrainians gave it their best shot. They organized this attack for some time and then launched that operation. Now, the big issue, the big challenge for the Ukrainians that I've talked about even before this Ukrainian offensive started was the lack of Ukrainian air power. You cannot win a war against a Russian military as long as the Russians have air dominance or air superiority near the line of contact. And what does that mean? The Russians are able to fly ground attack missions at will against Ukrainian targets. They are also able to use their standoff missile technology that is on various types of attack helicopters to attack Ukrainian targets. Furthermore, the Russians are becoming better and better at drone warfare. We have seen essentially the Russians really not using drones to a great extent other than target observation, to now using a variety of kamikaze attack drones against Ukrainian targets. But this is what Zaluzhny was talking about. Again, the ability of both the Russians and the Ukrainians to sense active movement operations very quickly. And then once that occurs, both sides are able to attack targets very quickly. And both sides are really trying to get their heads around this new type of warfare in which you have this data fusion, in which you immediately know what the enemy is going to do. And this gives us a sneak peek into the future of war. It is going to be a electronic warfare and the ability of nation states to shoot down satellites, global positioning technology, and the ability to jam data networks to prevent this fusion of information to enemy forces. That is the key to the future of warfare. Data. The transfer of data. The transfer of information. If you're able to shut that down, if you're able to shut down communications and the understanding of what the enemy is doing and blind the enemy, then that nation state in all likelihood will win the war of the future. And again, I imagine at this point the United States, China, European nation states are rushing to gain that technological advantage of who has the ability to blind who in modern war. Now, just because Zaluzhny believes that the war is in a stalemate, do the Russians believe that? And at this point, I would have to say no, that's not the case. The Russians right now are adapting to this war. They are probably adapting quicker in terms of the strategic implications of what is happening on the ground and in the air around Ukraine. So what do things look like next summer? What do things look like this winter? What do things look like the winter after next? That is what the Russians are preparing for. I believe that the Ukrainian High Command, in all probability, believes that they have about 6 months to 1 year of fight remaining in the Ukrainian military in terms of doing what they are doing now, outside of a massive infusion of additional United States assistance, including possibly direct support, which I believe we're possibly already seeing in certain cases. Now that is where, obviously, we understand where Zaluzhny's position is in terms of how he sees the war. There's a high probability he's going to get replaced, because what General Zaluzhny is saying right now is the war is unwinnable. He does not have the capability to drive the Russians out of what is essentially now Russia. He doesn't have that capability, and he's saying that. He's saying he can't win. He believes, at least in the short term, near term, 6 months to a year, he can hold the Russians off from gaining any more major amounts of territory. But any thought of the Ukrainians breaking through Zaporizhia and severing the land corridor to Crimea, or even retaking Bakhmut in the central part of the conflict, is just something that he does not believe is going to happen at this point. And that's where we sit in this conflict. The Russians, in all probability, are working on additional plans and additional offensive operations because they have the resources to do that. The Ukrainians are going to have to be very careful with their resources because they have expended massive amounts of resources in terms of casualties and equipment that was destroyed in the Zaporizhzhia offensive. Compounding that is just the ongoing conflict against the Russian Federation, a much bigger opponent with more resources than what the Ukrainians possess. Simple fact. So that's where we sit for today. We will continue to watch and report. Thank you for joining us. As always, more to come very, very soon. And as always, have a good day.